Hello guys and welcome to a new episode of Leubniz Lecture. Today we're going to talk about JavaScript and especially how to access HTML files and how to manipulate them from JavaScript. Before we're going to start, I want to mention that this video is part of my lecture at the Higher Technical School of Kaindorf in Austria. Okay guys, so don't waste any further time and let's go to our computer screen to see what I prepared for you. I prepared for you two demos for today, and therefore we have two index.html files and two main.js files. So the JavaScript files are still empty because we're going to create them together. But this is basically the HTML file that I'm going to refer to whenever showing you all the different functionality. And in the first demo, we're just going to take a look at how to access elements from JavaScript. So how to access HTML elements from JavaScript. On the right hand side, you should see how what the website should look like. And if you want to copy that HTML file, just feel free to pause the video right now. Okay, so when you're done copying, let's just dive into our main.js file and let's find out what we can do. But before we do that, we just have to examine the HTML file because obviously, if you take a look at lines 16 and 17, there is a problem there, guys, because we have two elements that have an ID, the same ID, and this is basically not allowed in HTML, but we don't get any error message. So if we take a look at the console here, nothing is in there. So no error message, and I want to show you what problems can come up if we do something like that. But first of all, what we would like to do is we want to grab row number 12, so the H2 with the ID heading. Let's just copy it and let's just go over here. So we want to grab a single element by its ID, and to do so, we have to use the document. The document is the so-called DOM, and DOM is short for Document Object Model, which is what the browser is creating to render to show our HTML file. And this document can be used to access all the elements and also to manipulate them, which we'll be talking about in the second demo. So there is a function called getElementById, and whenever we call that function and we pass the ID, in our case it's heading, we see that as soon as we're saving it, and if everything worked out fine, we can print it to the console, and we should see the element being printed down there if I refresh my page. So there it is. And when hovering over this element, we see that it's also being marked in our HTML file. And if we take a look down there, we see that basically we really see all the different things here. So we see the whole element with all its properties and everything that's important to know. Okay, so this is the first possibility, but there is another one which might be more interesting maybe for you. So this is another head, and we're now using the document again, but the function that we're going to use is the so-called query selector. And the cool thing about query selector is that we can use the same syntax that we used in CSS. So for accessing a normal element, or a normal HTML element, we just use the name of the tag. For IDs, we use the hash, and for classes, we use the dot. So we're just using the hash now for our ID, and it's called another heading. And we just print that one to the console. And if we take a look, we can now see that, yes, it worked out. And we now should see both of them printed to the console. Perfect. And whenever hovering over it, we see that both of them are somehow shown and marked in our document as well. Okay, so this is it for the ID. I think that should be pretty easy and you should be able to handle this. Now we're going to take a look at the same thing, but now we're taking a look at the class name. So if we observe the index.html file again, we see that we have a my heading here. And this my heading is just a class representing the h4 element. And what we do is we're using the query selector just once again. Query selector, remember, we use the same syntax, so dot my heading and console log the my head. And we see a third one is being printed on here. This is our h4. So looks pretty good and should be fine. Until now, we only selected one element, but we also might want to select multiple elements, and this is what the next step is about. So multiple elements, and to do so, let's try it with our ID heads, which is already some kind of problem, but we're going to use the document again, and now it's the query selector method, yes, but if we want to get more elements, we just add the word all. So it's query selector all, and then we're using the hash head1 in there to return that thing. And to our surprise, nothing happened. So it's there. We see two elements are being printed in there, although this is not allowed. So guys, please be very careful when using double IDs because it's never showing you that this is not allowed, but you might get very big problems because an ID can only come up once. So maybe let's do something like do not do this with IDs, okay? So make sure to not do that. But this is working out for class names. So we have class heads1. So document.query selector all. Remember, we have to use the all if we want to get multiple elements. And we're using head1 right now. And let's see if we have classes with head1. Yes, there it is. So it's two h2s. Let's print them to the console. And yes, now they are there. And the pretty cool thing is that, where we are, here we are, then we get both of them returned. So it's the same as for the head, which is not allowed, but here we get both of them returned, and we can also take a look at the node list prototype with the different functions that are available here, so that we can also work with the node list. And we see we have the for each in there. We have some, where is it? We have some size somewhere. There's the length. We have the entries, and so on. So a lot of different things that we can basically do and use with this node list. Okay, so next thing would be another method. So we can do const class heads2, and let's now do the same thing, but we're using another function, and the function we're going to use is get elements by class name. So this function already implies that we want to get multiple elements and that we have to pass a class name, so we don't have to use the dot here because it's only expecting us to pass a class name, okay? And when printing this to the console, we should just get the same result as before with one difference. Now an HTML collection is being returned and not a node list, and in some cases there might be a difference in handling them. Okay, so whenever you need a node list, you should use query selector all, otherwise the HTML collection, whereas my advice would be to always go for the query selector all and the query selector functions because they are just pretty easy to use and I think they make more sense. And the last thing then would be to just get a normal HTML element. So for example, some div, we can just do document.get elements by ID, elements by tag name, sorry. It's elements by tag name right now. Or we can use a div here, or we can do a document dot query selector all, but just passing the div. That will be the second possibility. Or we can also combine different things. So we can also say document.querySelector, and now let's search for a div with the ID my text. So before I'm going to save this, let's take a look what that should give us. So we have a div here with the ID some text. So we should only get that one div here being returned. And yes, exactly this is what we get. So it's just that one div down there. So we also have the possibility to combine them, and the same also works out for classes. So we can also do document.querySelector, and we can just pass a class here, my text, for example. So this is also working out, and yeah, this is why query selector is pretty cool, because you can just combine elements with their classes, with their IDs, and so on. So this really makes a lot of fun there. Okay, so this was the first part. So now we should know how to access the elements. And now we're going to take a look on how to manipulate them. And for that, we're going to switch to our second HTML file and our second index main.js file, which is still empty. But this should be our new HTML file. There is our console, so everything should be there. Just pause the video if you want to copy that file, and then we're ready to go on. Okay, so welcome back. If you pause the video to copy that demo file, we're now heading straight to our main.js file, and I think the simplest or the easiest thing that we would like to do is remove some element. So get rid of it. So we're going to get rid of our first heading that we have at the very top. So we're just using the query selector, the hash first heading, which is basically doing nothing right now, but I can say first head dot remove as a function, and this will just get rid of the first heading. Okay, did you see what just happened? So hello and welcome was the first heading, and as soon as I'm going to save this, it's being removed by JavaScript. Another function that is very useful is to get the parent element. So to get the parent element, we can just go for a query selector, and I'm just going to print a result now, so I'm not going to save them into variables anymore. You know that you can do that, but doesn't need to do that for the demo right now. So item 1, if I'm just going to do that, it just prints me item 1, which is basically that line here. But I want to get the list this item is in, so I'm just using dot parent element. And this now really prints the list for me. So if I take a look down there, we see that now the list is printed, and we can also see all the child elements in here, but the list is the element that's being returned when using parent elements. And there you have to be very careful, because there is a difference between using functions and using properties, and you have to remember when to use what. Okay. When talking about parents, we also would like to get children, and to get the children, we have two different ways. But first of all, we do not want to get the children directly. We want to count how many children we have. So we're just using the query selector once again to access my list, and then we're using the child element count as a property, and then we see 5. 5 is the result. Let's see if that's true. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so it seems to be working, and now let's see what else we can do in here, because we can also grab the child nodes, and we can grab the children. And there is a big difference between grabbing the child nodes and grabbing the children. Let's just find out what the problem is, and what we can do. I just missed the C for the console here at the beginning. That's why it's not printing anything. Okay, So we see we have two results. The first result, that was the child nodes. Here, a node list is returned, and we see that we have one entry for every text node and for our elements. So it's always a text node, an element, a text node, an element, and the text node is just some empty text right now. This is because of our line breaks that we have in there. And then the second way is just using children. We're really just getting the items returned in here. So here's the comparison. It's as an HTML collection, which might be easier to further process then. But this is what the difference is. So node list really returns some text nodes in between, which isn't that cool if you want to iterate over them. So using children is the much better way if you would like to iterate through the elements. Then we have some special childs. Let's name it that way. Because what we also can do is, let's just copy that down. What we also can do is we can use the last element child. So last element child is just returning item 5 in our case, or we can go for the first element child, which will return the first element, which is item 1 in our case. So it's also working out fine, but this is what we should do here. What's also interesting is how to grab the text that we have inside there. So this might be interesting to find out. So let's try this. We have different ways to do that. And first thing is we're going to grab our list again. Oh, no, we're grabbing the item 1 first because that makes more sense. And we're grabbing the text content. And then we see this is just returning item 1. Makes sense. This is what's written in there. Question, what happens if we're going to use text content on some list? For example, our list in here. And if we do text content now, we see that we get the whole text inside our list, also with the intents and everything that's there. Okay, so with all the different stylings and so on. So this is the text content, and we should know that this just gives us every tag inside our elements here. Then we have another possibility. What we can do is, I'm just going to copy it down because it's basically the same, just with different methods. And the other method is inner HTML. And if we use inner HTML for both of them, we see that for the item itself, nothing changed. So we just get the text that's written down there. But for the list, we are not getting the text only, but we're getting the whole HTML content in that list. So that's something you should remember, and that's pretty important. So that's now our inner HTML. This really gives us HTML text. And then finally, there is a third way of doing it, and the third way will be to just use inner text here. So let's use inner text for both of them. And when doing inner text, we see that we just get a human readable text, so without all the different intents and so on. So this is inner text, which is just only human readable. So this is what we're getting here. I would like to show you why it's important to differentiate at least between inner HTML and text content. And to do so, we are grabbing item 2 using a query selector. So hash item 2. And what we do is now we say dot inner HTML, and I would like to include something in there. So I'm just doing something like that, and we're going to bring in some HTML tag in there. Okay. What we can do is we can use a strong maybe, and then we can say hello from JS, and then /strong. Okay, so that should work out. And if we're going to save this, we see we have hello from JavaScript, and this is written in bold. This is what strong basically does in here. And now let's see the difference if we're going to use text content instead of inner HTML. Because now it's just writing the HTML content in there. So it's not rendering it at all. And that's the main difference between text content and inner HTML. So please keep that in mind whenever using this. Okay. Then that is pretty important. We can also grab class names of elements or their class lists if there are more of them. And once again, let's go for the list here. And let's just write down class name. When using class name, what we get is a list class and bold. So let's take a look at our list. So we have the list class and bold. So these are both of the elements and they're just being returned as a text. Isn't that cool if you want to modify it or whatever? So class name is pretty interesting if you would like to change the whole classes, so everything that's on there. But if you just want to add something or delete something, I think the much better choice is to use class list, because this is now returning a token list. And if we just take a look in here, we see that we have list class and we have bold. Let's zoom in a little bit. So we have list class and we have bold. So exactly what we want to do and what we need here. The cool thing with all of the things that we just did is that you cannot just use these functions or properties here to get values, but you can also set them. So you can use them in both ways, and that's pretty awesome. And the last thing that might be interesting for you guys is whenever you have some input field as our test input that we have, we can use the value. So we go for the hash main input, and we could just use the value property to grab whatever is written in there. So it gives us test down there because test is what I just wrote into that field. Okay, this is how that works out. And the last thing that we should discuss is how to create new elements, because that's also something that might be very useful and comes up very often. Okay, so when creating an element, let's pretend we would like to create a sixth element for our list that we have there. So we just go for that, and I just right now found out that I forgot a J here for the JavaScript. Yes, that looks much better. Something just always didn't seem right to me. Okay, so we want to create a sixth element for our list in here. So what we do is we use a document and we just use the function create element. And with that function, we have to pass the type of element that we would like to create. In our case, it's a list item, so li. Then we can do a lot of things with that. So we can first of all set attributes, and the attribute ID should have the value item 6. So you pass two parameters, one for setting the name of the attribute and one for the value. Then we can just set a class name, for example, just any simple class name here. And then just to show you, we can also use a class list to, for example, add something like something. Okay, so we're adding a class something right now. Then I'm using text content here. So text content equals item 6. And let's append it. So we can use the function append child to just add it to our element, and the element we're going to edit, this should be my text. My text wasn't created yet because my text is another way of adding a text content. Maybe let's do that later. So let's just comment that out and see what that does before doing anything. So how can we add the element? We are grabbing our list So query selector hash my list, and then we can just say append child item 6. That's it. Save it. And there it is. There is our item 6. So let's take a look. Instead of using text content here, we can also use, as you saw that before, inner HTML. This is strong my item. So this is another possibility, and now we see that the HTML is rendered. And the last possibility would be, this is why we need this append child now, we can create a new text node. So we can just use the create text node function here, grab an item, and then we have to append this to our element, okay? So now it says item 6 there, and maybe we should take a look at the elements so that you see what's going on there. So if we open that up here, we have our list here, and when we take a look at our item 6, we see it's exactly as we created it. We have the ID item 6. We have our class name and our something, and we have the text. And you now know 3 different ways of adding that text. And now you also will get to know different ways of adding the elements here, because this is the only way of doing it. What we can also do is we can grab the element once again. So it's my list. Don't forget about the hash because it's an ID. And then we can use the insert before. And the insert before is pretty interesting if we want to insert before certain elements. So right now I'm saying the element to be inserted is the item 6, and I'm passing null. And null means just add it at the end, so that nothing changes because this is what we already had before. So it's just added at the end here. And what happens if we're not entering null but something different? We can just say document.query selector, and let's select the item 4. And this should now add this here before item 4. So we see it's item 6, and then we have item 4. This is basically how that works out. Okay, so now you should also know how to access elements. Okay, guys, so this is already the end of this video, and by now you should know how to access elements from JavaScript. You should know how to manipulate HTML elements from JavaScript, and also how to create new ones, add them before other elements, and so on. I hope you learned something today and you also enjoyed it. So if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like. If you have any questions or you want to tell me something, just leave a comment down there. And if you do not want to miss any upcoming episodes, just feel free to subscribe my channel. So thank you very much for watching, and see you again next time. Bye.